Our first session addresses the theme of prosperity. As Badr mentioned, the key objective of this forum is to contextualize and make relevant the 5 key pillars of the Sustainable Development Goals for the region. It is time right here today to dive deeper and invite experts and role models to discuss and provide clear roadmaps to bringing these goals to the forefront of our personal and professional lives. In this session, we explore how to achieve shared prosperity for businesses and communities in these uncertain times. I'd like to welcome to the stage the distinguished panelists. Khalid Al-Hussan, CEO of the Saudi Stock Exchange, Tadawul. Sheikha Hanadi Al-Thani, founder and chairperson of Amwal. Sanjeev Chadha, CEO of PepsiCo, Asia and Middle East and North Africa. Arjen Radder, CEO of Philips Middle East and Turkey. Osman Sultan, CEO of Do. I would now like to hand over the stage to my dear friend and the panel moderator, CNN's Emerging Markets Editor, John Defterios.
Khalid, thanks very much for that. Good morning to this distinguished panel. Badr Jaffer, there you are. Thanks for having me moderate this session, and it's always nice to have CNN supporting your initiative. I was thinking, we had this conversation, I think, 4 years ago about launching the Pearl Initiative in Davos, and I see a lot of friendly faces from the same community. And I always say the Jaffers don't talk, they actually do. And I know you're saying you want to use the Nike phrase there, but the fact that this has moved forward and you're actually doing things to bring this region together on not only the sustainable development goals, but cooperation with multinationals, I think is honorable to say the least. The session is called The Big Picture, Prosperity. How do you create growth during uncertain times? And I put some thought into this last night and was thinking that we have entered a new normal. This is not what we've seen over the last 15, 20 years, where the US can grow 2.5%, 3%. The region 3 or 4 years ago growing 5 to 6%. The US will be growing 1.5% this year. The Eurozone perhaps 1%. The new normal also includes constant chaos. This is a column I wrote in the Gulf News and for other regional newspapers in the last few weeks. Constant chaos includes things we could have never predicted even a year ago. Brexit. Did we actually think that the UK would be leaving the European Union? A refugee crisis not only in the European Union, but particularly, and just came back from Jordan in the last 24 hours, trying to absorb 1.5 million people in an economy of less than 10 million people. It's a huge challenge. And then, I don't even have to describe the Trump factor. It's so unpredictable day by day. I promise you it'll be over in about 10 days' time. But it certainly boosted our ratings at CNN domestically, and we've got people glued. So he's entertaining, nevertheless, but I'm not sure as an American how we ended up in that category. But the other thing I found out when categorizing the new normal is that sustainability is a buzzword, of course. Khalid talked about it in his opening comments. Sir Mark addressed it as well. How do we understand sustainability? But what has evolved over the last 5 years, which is crystal clear, it's part of the common vernacular. I was chairing the United Nations World Tourism Organization event with the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, yesterday, and it was part of the entire discussion, how to have tourism development to address jobs and the youth unemployment that we see in the Middle East and North Africa. But very importantly, how do we do it in a sustainable way? And I think that's part of the new normal today. It's not something we'll try to hit these targets, we want to look good to our institutional investors. It's actually a reality. And how do you have multinationals cooperating with regional companies and even family groups today? It is part of the regional DNA today, not something we hold in very lofty aspirations. That's my thoughts. Just a quick couple of housekeeping points. Khalid asked to see if you had the app downloaded. We have 3 questions at the end of our session, so I'm going to ask you to vote on those. And I just want to alert everybody managing this operation today, make sure we have the microphones handy, because about 20 minutes into our session, we want to take questions from the floor if time permits. This is a spectacular panel. a stock exchange that's going to be going into the IPO market in 2018, a respected family trading group from Doha, two multinationals, one in the healthcare and industrial space, another one in the food space, and a well-known brand from Dubai in a consumer space, consumer interfacing space as a mobile operator. As I encourage them to do, we'd love to see a lot of dialogue amongst yourselves and then open the floor to our distinguished audience as well. So let's start, if we can, with Tadawul and why Tadawul has anything to do with sustainability, right? But if you think about it, you have a very ambitious 2030 plan that's keeping everybody running at a very quick pace, has us as journalists going into Saudi Arabia more often today. But what is the link, would you suggest, direct link between Tadawul opening up, number one, the economy opening up, and then importing best practices when it relates to growth and sustainability?
Thank you, John, and I would like to thank Badr and Carla and the Pearl Initiative team for hosting me today. When it comes to stock exchanges, I think our role to support sustainability is much easier than anybody else, because we host companies, listed companies, and we have a role to encourage them to adopt best criteria of ASGs, help them prove how these adaptation will help adaptation of high level of transparency, adaptation of good governance, and sustainable practices. All of these will help these companies, I mean listed companies, to attract institutional investors, which is basically the long-term investors that will help fund your growth and sustainable businesses. So as exchanges, we are simpler than others. If we talk about the Saudi Stock Exchange, I think by the recent opening the market for foreign institutional investors, that will make even our life easier because that will increase the level of awareness and importance of ESG criteria with regard to listed companies. But if I look at it, John, from a general perspective, I think the simple answer to following these criteria is by the private sector being convinced that ESG objectives are aligned with business objective and targets to maximize shareholder values. And there is from my opinion, a wrong perception, especially in the capital markets where I come from, that investing in companies that believes or respect ESG's criteria doesn't generate financial performance. So listed companies in general, and I'm going to use in general again, doesn't see immediate value of adapting ethical best practices as well as good governance. So they tend to narrow their focus on basically short-term returns, which is, if we look at it from perspective of, is there anything that proves that companies that adopt ESG standards are really generating financial performance? I think there are multiple indicators for that. If we look at MSCI Emerging Market Index and MSCI Emerging Market Index ESG, we will see over the last 10 years at least, this is the period I have looked at, since 2007, MSCI Emerging Market ESG Index has outperformed MSCI Emerging Market Index in both growth returns as well as net returns. So it is an evidence that institutional investors, long-term investors, are looking for companies that adopt good governance, high level of transparency, and as well as sustainable practices.
Good. What influence, if I can follow up quickly, just a brief answer if you can, will the multinationals coming into the Saudi economy? It's not like they haven't been in before. We know your partners very well, for example, with GE. Yeah. Philips is very active in the space as well. What influence are they having on the privately held Saudi companies that perhaps didn't make this a priority of sustainability and the link between growth?
The influence they will have, institutional investors, as you know, they need to know more about your company. So private or listed Saudi companies, even private sector, will have to communicate better on what they do with institutional investors. In order to attract them for funding, the influence, from my opinion, that they will have is adopting AST criteria standards in order for them not to go outside to seek fundings, is to look at it locally by institutional investor, whether these are local or foreign investors.
Great. Sheikha Hanadi, I want to circle back with you about the family trading groups, but I'll do so later in the panel. You have a very big benchmark coming up for Qatar hosting the World Cup. Mm-hmm. Initial criticism because of labor practices and opening up what is a small population to global scrutiny. What sort of influence is it having now for Qatar as a government, but as a business community, to adapt to the global spotlight? And then it suggests, yes, we want to make sustainability part of the equation as well. Has it been a positive but painful transition opening up to this sort of scale?
Can I go back one step? What sustainability means to me is managing your business in a proper ethical manner, a responsible manner in managing your business. And I think within the family-owned businesses in the private sector, this is embodied within our DNA. How do you manage your business better? How do you become more responsible towards your employees, suppliers, partners? And I think as generations coming from traders within the region, our word was our bond. So ethically managing our businesses was the way that our businesses flourished. What's different now, and I think what we're lacking and promoting in the region, is a more formalized way of establishing frameworks and processes for reporting and making sure that you can capture this responsible element and how it affects your bottom line. As Khalid was saying, that it has been shown that this gives you a better value for the long term. Family businesses have always looked at the long terms. We've always been looking to promoting wealth for generations to come rather than getting profits for the next quarterly report. I think as well within the region, we have some points that everyone keep on speaking about. Expo in Dubai, Qatar 2022. These are points that we are striving to establish ourselves and striving to develop to within the international standards. There are challenges, and no one can tell you that there is a perfect world, but we are facing these challenges as we go ahead, and I think we are in a much better position today than what we were in 5 or 10 years ago. But we still are facing some challenges, and with these challenges comes opportunities for better performance as well.
Okay, very good. Osman, Sultan, before I bring in our multinationals, I want to get an honest assessment from yourself. Is sustainability really embedded in the corporate DNA today? Is there just a public relations banner we want to all put on our folders or on our websites or presenting to our investors right now? Is it, even for a telecoms company like yourself, built into the DNA, and how?
Generally speaking, I think honestly that it is a journey that started with serious measures, that this is taken both at government level or corporate level more and more seriously. And these things are unfolding little by little. Now, on that, if you allow me, John, I would like to build that one important word that we've been using is the corporate governance. And I want to go beyond corporate in governance. There is not one industry, one event, one major that is not today exposed to the digital transformation that is happening. All of us, we are into this. And the world is changing. I don't think we need to convince our audience that radically things are done differently, businesses, socially, individuals, etc. And I strongly believe that new rules or governance are yet to be established. And I didn't mention only corporate governance. The entire governance of this digital universe is not yet something that is there. There are conversations. These conversations need to continue. But the most interesting thing, and this is why these type of initiatives and why the global compact things could be this globalization.
I should know better than that. I just wanted to get my cough out of the way. Sorry.
I thought this was a warning for something I said.
No, I'm not cutting you short.
No.
I know you're just warming up, but we don't want you taking the whole session.
Cut the guy. I didn't start it. No. So I think we are moving, all of us, from what I call the unshared certainties. Different industries, different even nations. We didn't need so much to share, and there was certainties going on. Through globalization, through these new technologies that are enabling different ways of doing things, to the shared uncertainties. We have to sit around the table, various industries. And the interesting thing, and the paradox, and how we are going to deal with this, and you mentioned this somehow in your introduction, is at the time where you would take a cab in the same way, or probably with the same interface and entity and behavior when you are here in Dubai, in Los Angeles, in other places. And more some generic behavior are induced by these global platforms. At the same time, we are seeing tendency for isolationism that you mentioned. The Brexit, the Mr. Trump's declarations on NAFTA that we have seen, tendencies in Europe for, let's isolate. So this paradox will need, if we are talking sustainability, needs to be addressed at some point. That's the global part. But here in the region, GCC, I strongly believe that there is a concern and there is a drive towards better governance, better corporate governance, better governance, generally speaking. So this journey is there. Is it in the... I'm a citizen of this part of the world, of the Arab world generally. And I would like to say, because we very often hear that, and we know that we have a lot of troubled places. And if we want to simplify things, we have been seeing every logic of development, every momentum of development preempted by a logic of clinic belonging. So, and that has been prevailing in the previous years. And in my opinion, you could have youth employment. You could have economic growth. If you do not have the umbrella of governance, and beyond the corporate governance, social governance. There are countries where economic growth was there. There are countries where, so I think that the world governance should be the key for the sustainability in this part of the region. We should have initiatives that will really put this at the heart of all what we're doing.
Good, but I know in my time, this is my 6th year living here full time, the evolution of this has moved rapidly. It was a discussion at a distance, now it's discussion right here, and as you suggested, it's an evolution. I think it's excellent to be able to bring in our two multinationals, and this is superb because they're very diverse in background, a multinational involved in industry and one that's involved in the food sector. If I can, let's start with you and Philips, and less so about the engagement with the Middle East and North Africa right now, but how has Philips evolved even in the last 5 years when the word sustainability has come forth? You've done your internal report cards, and so has Sanjeev at PepsiCo as well. Grade yourself in terms of what you've evolved in terms of the product line today, how much is green, how much is not, and then what should we expect over the next 5 years or leading to 2030 and the SDG deadline?
Well, good morning to all, and thank you, John, for your question. Philips been around for 125 years, and I know innovation has been very much part of the first day, and innovation has really changed over time. And I think we started with linear innovation, where you bring a technology from the one market segment to the next, and this is the way you expand your business. Today is very much about ecosystems and innovating around ecosystems, and I don't think that you can do that without making sustainability part of your DNA as well. And I gave you some data points this morning. We have our sustainability targets. We want to be carbon neutral by 2020. We have more than 50% of our sales is green. But we also, because target setting is one element of driving sustainability, another element is that you have your processes designed around sustainability. So when we innovate and we design, we have eco-design processes that help us to make sure that what we plan actually comes out as a sustainable product. Maybe one last example that I can give. We spoke this morning also about a little activation that we did around World Heart Day. Some of you may have noticed that. It was in the Mall of the Emirates around World Heart Day, which was the 29th of September. And we met people. They came to our little setting in the Mall of the Emirates, and we asked them in a tablet a couple of very simple questions. And that had to do with your age and how do you invest in your own health. And the outcome was that we found that on average, the age of the heart of an individual was 20% higher than their actual age. So 20%, imagine that for all of you, the age of your heart is 20% higher than your actual age. Now you look all still relaxed when I say that, but I can tell you when you open a conversation with people individually, it really triggers the discussion around prevention. And when I look at health and healthcare, which very much the pure play focus of Philips going forward, I think if you start to think broader than that, and you start to think around sustainability lines, you go from diagnosis and treatment more toward prevention. You open these kind of discussions with, let's say, consumers, but at the same time, you're also able to look at more chronic patients that you can treat at home. That end-to-end thinking, for me, is also sustainability. And when you think around connectivity, when you think along what we call the health continuum, if you make that part of your DNA, sustainability is the standard outcome.
Great. Let me follow up before I bring in Sanjeev here. Just take the lighting sector and what's evolved over the last decade, and what sort of innovative breakthroughs are we likely to see, because it's directly linked to sustainability, of course, and power usage and the rest. What are you trying to introduce in the region here over the next 5 years, would you say?
Lighting is actually a very disruptive industry. It was the heart of Philips 125 years ago. And of course, we all have light points, light bulbs in our house. So it's something that we interact with all the time. And it's quite clear that all the traditional lamps, incandescent lighting, that will be gone. And it will be gone much faster in this region than it will be in my part, my home country, and in Western Europe and in the US in general. So we see the whole business going to LEDs. And LEDs, of course, immediately means that you go from traditional to, am I audible, by the way? Okay.
Yeah.
That you go from traditional lighting to green lighting and LEDs. At the same time, the direction that Philips is taking is not so much more about individual bulbs or individual LEDs. It's very much around lighting as a service. Think about you are in an office and your office is empty, or at least part of your office is empty. You don't want light in an office that is empty, because that's a waste of energy. The same is true for a city. You don't want, in areas where there's no one present, you don't need light. While governments may say, in other parts of my city, I want beautiful lights, because I want to attract tourists. And lighting will become intelligent. Lighting will contain sensors. We actually believe that going forward, light bulbs will become routers, and we will be communicating to routers going forward. Now you can imagine that's a very transformative industry at the moment. And that's also why Philips has decided to put our lighting business on its own feet. Part of the lighting business has been floated in May at the Amsterdam Stock Exchange so that they can attract their own capital and really drive this ambitious vision going forward.
Very interesting. Okay, good. Sanjeev, most would think PepsiCo as a company that makes, of course, Pepsi and a whole range of snack food products that probably wouldn't help on the cholesterol side and our arterial health, shall we put it that way? But there's a different story at PepsiCo. You're moving rather rapidly when it comes to your product line and sustainability. Give us a snapshot of how you're trying to evolve what's on the market today and where you're going.
Sure, John. You're right. Obviously, our business is much more known by the name Pepsi, and we have a lot of loved products on the beverage side of the business. What is probably lesser known is that we are more a food company, an agricultural company, than we are a beverage company. More than half our turnover comes from foods. We have 22 brands which sell over $1 billion, and a lot more brands of food brands than our beverage brands. And that is evolving dramatically as we speak. 25% of our turnover right now is actually in nutrition. And it's in brands and products which are really catering to positive nutrition as well. So yes, we started off, our heritage certainly has been carbonated soft drinks and snacks. But over time, I think we have obviously seen the changing needs of the consumer, the health of the consumer, and are really committed to making a significant change in our portfolio. And indeed, in the way we do business as well. And that takes me to the second subject on sustainability. And we have a term for it. Our vision in PepsiCo is something which we call performance with purpose. And this started about 10 years back, in fact, almost exactly 10 years back. And basically, it recognizes something which we fundamentally believe in, which is that to do well in business on an ongoing basis, we have to be doing that responsibly as well, doing good as well. And actually, 10 years back, we set some goals for ourselves in terms of performance with purpose, both financial goals, but also goals to do with the environment, portfolio, and our talent, our people as well. And in fact, just the timing of this conference is amazing, because just 1 week back, we published our report, which is the Performance with Purpose Sustainability Report for the year 2015. And just 1 week ago, we introduced our new goals for 2025. It's called Performance with Purpose 2025. And the whole objective there is to really direct our focus on increasing the healthy connection between people, our food, and our planet. And that's going to be the focus going forward from here. I'd just add one more thing, that I really do believe partnerships are absolutely crucial in all that we are talking out here. You know, as you mentioned, it is such an interconnected world. It is such a fast-changing world. Our issues are common issues. And I would just urge, and I strongly believe in the need for partnerships, not just within corporations, obviously with governments, with non-government institutions as well. And the more we partner, I believe the more we can progress in this arena.
Great. I'm going to follow up with you quickly. I know this clock isn't right, but I think we need to reset to have another 35 minutes, because it's showing that we're finished, and we only had 20, which I know. So I'm correct in saying, yeah, perfect. I thank you, Badr. Since it's his event, he can let me go and cut me off whenever he wants. I want to go back to my opening comment in just a second about constant chaos, and how constant chaos in finance, lower oil prices, Libya, Syria, is affecting that move to sustainability and to growth. But I wanted to follow up with you on potato chip manufacturing. You said something to me interesting in the green room when we were having the conversation. No water in potato chip manufacturing. Cleaning Gatorade bottles with air and not water. So these are kind of very innovative ideas, but pick one of the two and why you've moved into that direction so quickly.
So the performance with purpose goals that I talked about for the next 10 years, really, it's actually very similar, Badr, to the 5 Ps that you talked about. We call it the 3 Ps, a bit more modest. We talk about products, planet, and people, right? And our objective really is to build more nutritious products, to build greater sustainability in our supply chain, in our product supply chain, and really get much stronger women empowerment amongst our workforce. Going back to your point, within the supply chain aspect, we obviously are in the beverage business. We're large consumers of water. In snacks as well, we consume, and foods, we consume a fair amount of water. And obviously, we operate in very, very water-stressed areas, including right here in the Gulf, which, by the way, is a very big part of our business. We are very proud of it. We sell, consumers purchase about $4 billion of our products across the Gulf region. Water is one of the things that we've been focusing on, and I'm particularly proud of the achievement of PepsiCo in the water arena. I'll give you some examples of that. I'm from India originally. India is terribly water-stressed, and we said, what role should PepsiCo play to be considered as an asset rather than a liability when it comes to water in a water-stressed country? And one of my team members said, well, you know what, Sanjeev, the only thing which will get us there, if we actually save or replenish more water than we consume. And that is the audacious goal that we set for ourselves. This is way back, about 10 years back. And believe it or not, through ingenuity, through a sense of purpose, through partnerships, we achieved it in 4 short years. And in fact, we got the Stockholm Water Award in the year 2012 because of that and various other innovations around water, a couple of which are what you mentioned. So in the UK, our goal in one of our potato chip plants is to turn off all the taps. No water, no taps. How? Because interestingly, a potato is 80% water. And the question, therefore, is the technological one. How can you extract all that water so that it is sufficient to achieve all the water you need in the plant? And we're halfway there. And you're right about the Gatorade washing with air now as well. Right here in Saudi Arabia, last year, we deal with 6,500 farmers because we do a lot of farming and a lot of crops. And we saved, along with our partners, 990 million liters of water in 1 year through helping and enabling them with better agricultural practices as well. And think about this. So this year, we'll be consuming 2/3 of the water that we consumed 10 years ago, despite a very rapidly growing business as well.
And population, of course.
Yeah.
I want to bring back this theme of constant chaos, because I was kind of putting different pieces of the puzzle together. I don't think you could find a period in history where you've had this much chaos, both external chaos, here in the region, Syria, Libya, Iraq is constantly on the table. Sheikh Hanadi told me before we sat down today, I saw the financial crisis firsthand, 2008, 9, and 10, a monster project in the center of Doha with Amwal. How do you manage constant chaos and then still try to keep your eye on the prize if we're going to 2030 and the SDGs and a reasonable level of growth? So take it from a family business, and you can start. And the two, all 5 of you can just share different ideas, but I think it would be interesting to say, this is the big picture. How do you create prosperity in the certain level of chaos that we've never seen before?
Can I start with the word prosperity, first of all?
With what?
Prosperity.
Yes.
We're promoting prosperity. We're not promoting GDP growth, economic growth per se. We're promoting the well-being of individuals. And I think when I was asked to join the panel as a family business, I'm not an international business, how far am I from pledging towards the Sustainable Development Goals? And then when I started looking at the goals, these are challenges that we face in every country. And maybe in this period of chaos, some challenges are more important than others. For us within the Gulf, it's the employment of youth. It's the ignition of the SMEs and innovation. It's gender equality. It's fair pay. These are things that I can tackle from my own business. And this is where I see, Khalid was mentioning that there are very important people. I don't think governance today is a meeting of important people. It is speaking about fairness in the way of conducting our businesses. How do we conduct our businesses with a fair attitude, not looking at the bottom line, but looking at the well-being, prosperity of our communities? And I think this is very important, especially now in the period that we are in today. But to take it back to one point, the financial crisis meant that we stopped looking at shareholders, we started looking at stakeholders. And today our stakeholders are not only individuals within our organizations, within our community, but we all became global citizens, looking towards establishing goals for the whole world. And this is where I think the role for the private sector and family-owned businesses is. And this is where I welcome when they mentioned that there is a pledge, there is an actual action plan after this conference for companies to pledge, even in a small way, how will they take the road going forward to establishing better corporate governance within their own organizations.
Good. This is not easy because you're ramping up, Khalid, in an economy, literally trying to go over 60% of GDP created from the private sector. So not top-heavy government, not over-dependency, as the Deputy Crown Prince was suggesting. We want to break this addiction to oil and being spoiled by oil revenues. But to do so in such a chaotic environment is not simple. How do you articulate the calibration of that taking place in the kingdom today?
I think looking at the component of the economy today and how could we rebalance, especially from the Saudi perspective, the private sector contribution to our GDP, etc. Looking in a micro level, at the exchange level, as you said, market cap today is around 60% of GDP, which is in most developed markets that exceed 100% of GDPs. And this is what we're trying to do. Such initiatives like hosting SMEs, for example. A lot of family businesses in regions are very potential for growth. They require a venue for funding. They require a venue that helps them continue their business for generations, because from my opinion, this is what family businesses are about. So hosting venues for companies to participate in will help them adopt best practices by default, as well as if I go to the perspective continuation of Sheikha Hanadi's comments on crisis, I don't like crisis, but I would say crisis sometimes make you find where are the gaps and correct them at the right times. So there are benefits of going into these cycles, and
because it forces change, is what
exactly. Because prevention is what you're looking. What are you trying to look at? What are the preventive measures that, with any wave that will hit my sector, the industry, or in general the economy, that will reduce the amount of impact on my company and other things as well? But we have gone through several worldwide, regionally, and I think it made and it will make us better in how do we conduct business from ethical and transparency standards. I'll add one opinion onto that. If you look at developed markets, from my opinion, there is a trend of growth and awareness in international environments. However, regionally, I will echo my colleague here when he said, still, we're moving in the right directions. People are start to look at these standards and criteria, but not yet enough, from my opinion. And once we help people being aware of how these standards help them, I think we'll achieve what we expect.
It's interesting what you said, because I remember interviewing Peter Brabeck when he was CEO of Nestle, and he said, I was so excited to be the CEO of the group, and I was waiting for the job for 20 years, that I started sprinting out of the starting blocks and was sprinting, and he said 6 months into the game, I realized my whole team had collapsed, so I had to do my own calibration to manage that. There's a danger of that in the kingdom, right? To bring people along. You're shocking them at this stage, but do they get their balance and then move forward?
what we're trying today to do is basically is to communicate and communicate and communicate. What are we trying to achieve? How do we do it? Sort of balancing between benefits and fast movements, because you need to move fast. We have a very aggressive and ambitious transformation plan, and hopefully that will move the country from a stage to a better stage.
Great. Thanks a lot for the candor there. Let's hear from our multinationals and our telecom company here. How are you managing change today? Ayun, do you retrench in the Middle East or North Africa because we're not at $115 and we're at 50? You don't want to leave your partners here. You don't want to give up what you've established. How do you get the balance right?
No, I think one of the things that's important for multinational companies, and we spoke a little bit about it, building on what Sanjeev said, is you need to have a mission, and that rallies everyone. Our mission is to touch the life of 3 billion people by 2025 in a meaningful way. And I think if you have that kind of vision, it gives you a long-term perspective. And I think the worst thing you can do if there is a sudden blip or volatility, that you start to paralyze. We've been here since 65 years. We've been trading with Saudi since the 1930s of the last century. We've been in Turkey since 86 years. And we've seen different things. And I think that's the advantage of multinational companies, that you will work and live through volatility. And maybe just give you 3 examples. We actually are trying to be more and more local. I talked about innovation before, and innovation historically happened far away. And if you were close to customers, your job was to convince these customers that this was great innovation. Now innovation actually happens with customers. It happens very close to the market. And we have actually also made decisive moves, either in joint ventures or through acquisitions in a number of countries here in the region to get much closer to our customers. And then we work through processes that we call co-create. And when you co-create, you tackle complex problems. And I believe complex challenges in volatility you find very difficult to tackle on your own, so you need to find partners. And that's also what Sanjeev said, find partners, find customers, and co-create. And I think that is the way you deal with complex problems. So these are 3 examples of how we're trying to navigate to volatility.
Yeah, it's incredible volatility. Osman, you broke into a market that was basically a one-horse town, if I can use the American vernacular, and because of your market share growth, you could almost say, I don't need to continue to innovate. But this is a space that's always changing. The use of video is completely transformative for our business and journalism as well. How do you manage your expectations now after that burst of growth, capturing your market share, and try to have sustainable growth going forward?
Well, actually, and I think that in our industry, and probably this could be extrapolated, if we can say that there is a recipe, you have to be somehow stubborn on the vision. What do you think is the end game? But more and more flexible on the path and the execution. This is how you calibrate. If you ask at some point some officials from the Singapore government, they will tell you, and I think this expressed that, think ahead, think across, and then think again. I think that's a nice way, and I don't want just this to be kind of, but I think this is a very nice way to express that there is a constant dynamic in your intellectual process. One word to add on that, and that you mentioned this actually when you said, in your CEO experience, engaging the people that are with you. Change, crisis, constant chaos are very disturbing. They take us out of our comfort zones, and the people working with us.
So you have to constantly communicate.
Make sure that constantly you're engaging and measuring. Engagement is something that you can measure. And actually, engagement should be something that we should always keep in our mind for the sustainability concept.
Okay, good. Sanjeev, you had some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think first I'd just inject a point of caution. I think the biggest danger in slightly more turbulent times is to take short-term decisions which sort of derail in an enterprise or the values and so on and so forth. And I think that's the big watch out to be mindful of. The second thing I'd say is that I encourage my teams to really look externally a lot more, because chances are what happens or tends to happen in difficult times is people sort of hunker down. Whereas what they need to do is reach out and again learn from others. And that's what we try to do. Again, we have the benefit of operating in 200 countries. So the biggest benefit I try to bring to my team is learning from each other, being transparent, very visible, in terms of great work which is being done in one part of the world, in difficult times, for example. So right now, specific example, we are learning from Russia, because the Russian business is going through a difficult time. The Russian economy is going through a difficult time.
And you've made acquisitions there too.
Absolutely. And there, those guys are doing a fabulous job in terms of productivity, in terms of how they're reorienting the way they're doing business to work through that difficult time. While I think you made a very important point about keeping absolutely your North Star firmly in your sights as well. The second aspect I'd say is human capacity and capability. I think that is the other critical investment. It's not an overnight thing, but that is what I really firmly believe in. That's what we're doing, and I'm seeing some terrific results across the Gulf region. And I'll give you one specific example, which you'll be delighted by. So our latest snacks plant in Dammam has 100 women operating our snacks lines.
Wow.
And it is a delight to see. The productivity is higher, the loyalty is higher, and the smiles are much wider as well.
Terrific. Can we get the lights up a little bit? And I just want to make sure we have the microphones available, because I would like to open the floor to questions. Could you just wave if you have the microphones? Terrific. Why don't you come on around? Do we have any questions from the floor? We have one here in the center. If you can stand up, sir, so they can see you. I would just ask you to use discipline in terms of keeping the questions brief and identify yourself and then direct it to somebody on the panel. We need to really hustle with the microphones, please. A second question from the floor after that? And one here in the front row, please, as well. Go ahead. And one, ma'am. Hello? Excuse me. The gentleman here. Thanks. Please.
I just want...
Let's have the microphones up, please.
Good morning to everybody.
Thank you.
I hope you can hear me now. I just want to make a couple of points. The first one, if I say it, and still be allowed to be in the room, that is a good indication. The second one is a general comment. The first one is about the start of the conference, where you say you're going to start at 9, and you start 9:37. This is not good for a big conference like this. I think there need to be a respect for the attendees, and it's a problem we have in this part of the world, but I do hope that it changes in the future. If you are in Singapore, you would have been thrown out. The second one, I want to make on the sustainability is all about good of society. And the companies fail to understand that without society, they will not even exist. And this is very important. I support what you said, that we have to direct it to society, and the governance is very important aspect that you have to always direct your thing. And there's a very big saying, or very important one, where it says the institutions are licensed by society. If they stop serving the society, they have no business to exist. That's very important. And the last point I want to make on corporate governance, where I specialize, is that only about 15 to 20% of the companies are supposed to implement corporate governance guidelines, while the 80% in our part of the world are not yet obliged to comply with corporate governance. And these are the family businesses and government businesses, the government entities themselves. And I hope the attention should be directed to that side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sheikha Hanadi, we're a little bit short on time, but when it applies to family businesses, it's organic. Should it be a requirement going forward?
Absolutely not. There is no one-size-fits-all in corporate governance. It depends on the actual culture, actual size of the company. But I disagree with you. I think today, with the need of financing, with the need of most family businesses to be financed from the international markets, most of them are finding it very important to have better corporate governance standards. I think there is empirical evidence that 84% of institutional investors would pay a premium for a better governed company in comparison to less governed company, even if they had the same financials. So I think family businesses understand that, and we need financing from local and international markets, and this is why most of the companies are striving towards having standardized, formalized corporate governance flows.
Okay, very good. The last question from the floor here, please, just if we can keep it brief, and then we'll close out.
Hello? Sorry. Hello?
This is very cute. You're sprinting back and forth.
Good morning. Sorry, I have the microphone.
Go ahead.
Sorry, if I can, I'm sorry. I picked the microphone first. Sorry, my name's Stephen King. I just want a question for Sheikha, Hanadi, and Khalid and Osman. For companies in the region, why should we get involved with the Sustainable Development Goals locally? I mean, we've seen Pepsi and Philips doing it from an international point of view, but what is the importance here locally for these Sustainable Development Goals?
We are a part of society. The biggest transformation of our economies are going to come from the private sector and family-owned businesses. If you look at the sustainable goals, they don't only take the elimination of poverty as a whole, but they look at equality within the workplace. They look at fair pay. They look at the better use of resources. These are things that are within the realm of how we govern our companies. And I think it is very important that we don't misplace our sense of empathy when we govern our businesses, because we have to be humans governing people and managing people for the good of society. And this is the only way that we can be sustainable.
Okay, good. Final point from the floor.
Thank you.
Got to be quick here.
Can you hear me? Okay,
yes.
Excellent. This is Al-Walid Al-Sinani from Sabiq Corporate Governance. My question, or maybe comment and a question, is that sustainability initiatives do not last for long, especially with the family businesses companies. Now, I totally agree that governance is the way to basically make this more sustainable. And I'm happy that there is no regulator on the floor today, and we all have businesses and exchanges. Can we see the exchanges, and Khalid Hussan is one of us, one of the panelists today, calling for companies to report in sustainability and encourage them, so we can see better examples in the stock exchanges?
Very good. Thank you very much. That's a question for you, Khalid. Very quickly, can this encouragement actually deliver transparency and prosperity at the same time?
Of course. The exchange is always trying to create a venue for all stakeholders, investors, issuers, as well as regulatory bodies. So in order for the exchange to attract foreign investors, institutional investors for local issuers, I would agree with my Walid comments that the exchange should adopt tools. One of them is reporting on sustainability, which is exactly what institutional investors will look at. And I think I was talking to him before this panel, actually, of how could we cooperate. Sabiq is a leading company on that manner, and then we will work on that to help bring reporting and sustainability within the Saudi context in a better standards.
Great. I'm sorry we had to cut the questions short on the floor, but we had to your point, the first point of us starting later, we had huge traffic problems and the changing of our next speaker's agenda as a result. So thanks. That's the reason we started 30 minutes later than expected. Thanks for all the candid answers. Nice round of applause to our panel. Thanks very much.